Very good, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. I would like to announce that first do the Open Public Meeting Act and then go through the agenda. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Public Opens Meeting Law was enacted to ensure to the public to have advance notice and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the School Districts of the Chathams Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the time, date, place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the Chatham clerks of the borough and the township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the Independent Press. Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind doing roll call?
Sure. Mr. Gilfillan.
Here.
Ms. Chicarelli.
Here.
Mrs. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Connors.
Oh, here. Sorry.
Ms. Cronin. Mr. Franz.
Here.
Ms. Kenny. Mr. Nominator. Ms. Weber.
Yes, here.
6 persons accounted.
Thank you. Would everybody please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
8 o'clock drop.
I'm going to call an audible and move my board president comments to prior to the committee meetings and jump right to superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. A few items. The first I'll start with is that this morning we had a visit from the Department of Education, someone named Lou Camerata, who works in the Office of, I guess, Security and Emergency Preparedness for the DOE. So, as he explained, one of the initiatives in the department under the direction of the governor is to conduct unannounced security visits to school districts throughout the state. So he arrived early this morning. We proceeded to Chatham High School and Lafayette Avenue School, where he essentially coordinates through the Morris County Prosecutor's Office with the local police departments. So we conducted an active security drill unannounced at the high school today and Lafayette Avenue School. He observed that, took notes along with the police that were there, and then we had a debriefing afterward. And we did the same thing at the middle school. So each visit probably took somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour and a half. When we were at the middle school, we did the drill during lunch, so that was, of course, an interesting, complicating factor. And by and large, things went very, very well. He was incredibly complimentary of the staff and the students who did exactly what they're supposed to do when we have one of these drills. And he'll be giving me some additional feedback in the coming weeks.
And how was the students' reaction based on your observations?
The students were terrific. They always are terrific. I was really struck in Lafayette Avenue School, for example, how quickly the staff were able to get students into classrooms, how quiet it was. We really didn't have too many issues there. But nonetheless, he had some suggestions for us on how to improve our processes, and that's what it's all about. In addition to that, just wanted to remind everyone that the first week of June, we have a series of speakers who are coming to the district. One of them is the author of Wonder, R.J. Palacio. Another is Eric LeGrand, and another is a boy from Summit High School who is a star track and cross-country athlete. Tickets are still available for those events. I'll be sending a reminder out to the parent community tomorrow that we're 2 weeks out, and if they would like to purchase tickets, they may. And then we're also less than 2 weeks out from the Relay for Life. I think this is the 4th year where we're hosting and helping support that community event. That'll take place at Haas Field a week from Memorial Day weekend. So big events on the horizon, and they coincide, of course, with other end-of-the-year celebrations.
And the tickets for the speaker series, are they through Community Pass, through the administration?
They're through a different website, but if you go on our website, you can just read the information there and click on the website and purchase them.
Okay, thanks.
And I think that's it from me.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. LaSousa? No? Moving on, Mr. DeQuilla?
Nothing to report at this time.
Does anybody have any questions for Peter? with his report? No, we'll talk about some of the other stuff later. So committee reports, before we go into the committee reports, I just wanted to remind the board members and the public, maybe remind each other of what our role is. And in addition to the hundreds of hours we spend in meetings and preparing for meetings, we are also required to take mandatory training classes. Each year that you're on the board, you have to take a different class, so you're exposed to more additional training, some more complex things. As you get more involved in the board, you receive additional training. So, but in addition to the mandatory training that we have to take every year, we also every year have to take an ethics course every single year. And I just wanted to point out one of the particular items that is, we remind ourselves and we just make sure that we're focused on this. And there's a number of particular items that we, from an ethics point of view, some of it common sense, but I just want to remind everybody, and Mr. Belding used to do this every reorg meeting, but I just want to point out again, item D, we always call it item D, and it states from a board member's perspective, I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are run well. So again, just to be clear, our job is to ensure that Dr. LaSousa and his staff do their job. I'm going to use myself as an example. I have 28 years of designing and programming software. I have 0 days in writing curriculum for design and technology. It is not my job to write design and technology for 4,100 students that are currently here or the 41,000 that will be here over the next 10 years. That's what we hired Dr. LaSousa to do, and that's why Dr. LaSousa hired his staff. Beth Grant is the expert in human resources and recruiting personnel that she's done. Those are their jobs. Karen Chase is in charge of the curriculum and program, and Mr. DeQuille is in charge of our finance. But again, just to be clear, our job is to make sure that their process is well thought out, that the evaluation is thorough, that they have done a suitability check, that they have done background checks, that they have done a suitable gap analysis, that the program, the vendor, the publisher that they're bringing into our school is a suitable fit for our school. It is not our job to decide which publisher Ms. Chase is going to bring in for an Algebra 1 class. It is our job to make sure that Ms. Chase did the due diligence and performed a significant gap analysis. And we may ask questions, how many other schools use this? What is the ramp rate? What is the training involved? What is the adaptability rate? What is the success in other schools? It is not our job to do their jobs. So I just want to be very clear, this is our role. And again, while we take input from the public, it is also not the public's role to design, curriculum as well. That's why we've hired these folks around these tables and their staff, and in conjunction with the experts that they've subsequently hired. So again, I just want to remind, the board members that it is our job to make sure that the district is run well, not to run the district. So now moving into our committee reports. Ms. Clark, would you mind leading us off for personnel?
Personnel has not met since our last meeting.
Thank you. Moving to curriculum. I'll just step in for Ms. Kenny. We just had a curriculum meeting where we went over the disciplinary report for the district for this current school year. That will be presented to the public on June 1st, which I believe is 2 weeks out. So we went through, asked some pointed questions. They look for trends. What tools do they use to track these trends? But again, that will become a public presentation on June 1st, 2 weeks out. We spent the entire hour talking about that. Finance and facilities, Mr. Gilfillan.
We have not met since our last meeting. We meet Wednesday this week at 6:30.
Next week,
Next week?
27th.
No, next week. My
Okay.
calendar says this week.
At what time?
What
Oh,
time? 6:30.
6:30?
Okay.
6:30 on the 27th.
Yes.
Thank you. And policy and planning, Mr. Franz?
We have not met, we're meeting tomorrow night.
No.
I'm sorry, tomorrow?
Night, 8 o'clock.
You're meeting at 8 o'clock? And there's no meeting before that?
No, I have a conflict, and that's why.
Oh, okay,
I was
very good.
counted To 8
Okay, thank you. And is it here or down at a different location?
in my house. No.
This isn't the one where you said you...
It's here.
Oh, it is here, okay, very good. I'm confused with a different meeting, I apologize. Thank you. Moving on to liaison reports, Mr. Connors?
Nothing to report from the borough.
The township, Ms. Clark?
They just wanted us to remind us that the primary election is June 2nd.
That's funny, the borough didn't want me to remind anybody about that.
We just did.
Did you ask?
Oh, now it's showing up.
Mr. Connors, back to you for the athletic boosters.
Yes, the athletic boosters met on May 5th, and nothing major to discuss with regard to the Board of Education. However, I would like to, again, compliment them for all that they do for the district. They voted on a number of items, many of which would included donating monies to the various athletic endeavors, supporting coaches and the like. There's also the spring fundraiser, which is a significant fundraiser for the boosters. It is this Friday. Yeah, I know it's Monday, the Friday before Memorial Day, but it is a tremendous organization. I would urge one and all to please stop in and support and show your support for the what they do for the entire district. Because quite frankly, what they do is takes a brick out of our bag, and I think it's appropriate that when people give as the boosters, it's time for others to give to them. So I would urge that you do that. And the next booster meeting is June 2nd at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. Music theater boosters report, back to me. So our district, the second and third graders enjoyed the annual instrument demonstrations on May 6th, and this is where they learn about instruments that they may want to play as they move forward into Lafayette in the middle school. The members of the Chatham School String Orchestra program offered a dynamic presentation of the progression of the excellence in the District Orchestra String Fest for 2015. That was held May 8th at the Chatham High School. Chatham Middle School had 2 of its 3 spring concerts last week, and they will complete their concert series on June 3rd. And on May 15th, the Chatham Middle School 8th grade band, the chorus and the orchestra all traveled to Sucon Valley Regional High School, and they performed for adjudication with Musics in the Park prior to heading over to the Dorney Park for the afternoon of fun and celebration. And all 3 of those ensembles, they earned a rating of excellent, which is the highest rating for their performances. Our theater program was distinguished for excellence in their lighting design for their one-act plays, the 2 one-act plays that were performed in the winter, or in the fall, I'm sorry, these were the fall plays. Firebirds and Snow Angels at the Montclair Theater Awards, which was held on May 11th. And the Chatham Performing Arts Club, also known as CPAC, ended this year with a very successful concert on May 15th. 21 student acts ranging from singers, dancers, and bands performed to a near-capacity high school auditorium. The show was emceed by a freshman, Charlie Thompson, and brought in about $2,200, making the total raised for VH1's Save the Music $3,645 for the 2014-15 school year. Presidents Devlin Pendel and Anastasia Aravides will be graduating this year, and they're handing over the reins to juniors Rima San Pedro and Alex Lynch. CPAC is always a great time. The students have a fantastic time attending that and performing at that. This week, Chatham High School proudly presents its choral and orchestra concerts. In the upcoming weeks, the middle school, the Lafayette, will present their programs for the 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. And finally, the head show will be on June 2nd at 7 p.m. at the high school auditorium. The title is called Oops. And please visit the district websites for all of these upcoming programs. Ms. Kenny is not here for Chatham Education Foundation, and neither is Mr. Nonamaker for Recreation, and neither is Ms. Cronin for the PTO District Cabinet meeting. There was no district cabinet meeting, was there? Since we last met?
I can't remember if it was before or after
I think it was
our
before,
last
'cause-
meeting.
Yeah, I don't think it's met since, because she mentioned it last time. Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to pass the minutes of the May 4th public session. John's not here.
Second.
I wasn't there, can I second?
No, I'll second.
No.
Thank you. All those in favor that were here?
Aye.
Abstentions? Who needs to abstain?
Mr. Connors, Mr. Franz, resolution passes 402.
402, thank you. 402, and just a slight adjustment to our public commentary session. We're going to go through the public commentary and then our action items, then board business, and then public commentary. But for the public commentary, if there's any students here, because I know that they're kind of jammed up with finals, if there's any students here that want to address the board, if they don't mind coming up first, and this way you can get home and Jane's not here, but, oh, there you are, Jane. I want to make sure that you get to your homework.
Should I write my name?
Yes, please. Got it. Okay.
Thank you. And if there's any other students, Nabil doesn't mind if you cut them off, right, Nabil? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maddie Schroeder, and I'm a sophomore at Chatham High School, and I'm currently working on my Girl Scout Gold Award. For my project, I'm hosting a one-day girl empowerment event for middle school girls at CMS on June 6th. This event's designed to teach self-defense and self-escape methods while increasing self-esteem and improving their personal safety. The girls will develop an awareness of potentially dangerous situations while learning to be empowered. Multiple dynamic experts, including Christopher Tomeno, the building safety coordinator at CHS, will work with the girls throughout the day. I chose to do this for my Gold Award because I've noticed that girls in our community and beyond lack self-confidence and do not always stand up for themselves. This often leads to girls becoming victims of violence and abuse as teens and adults. I'm concerned because I don't think that these issues are being addressed in our community. It is important to recognize these concerns and to help girls become more confident, aware, and empowered before they go to college. I'm here tonight to ask the board to consider including a program such as mine in the new health curriculum. Perhaps the program could be for seniors and could be part of a college readiness unit. I recognize that the needs for boys and girls also vary. However, all students would benefit from an awareness or an empowerment program. Thank you again for your attention and time, and I hope you will consider my suggestion. And I have some of the flyers that I made for the event that I can hand out.
That'd be great. And Maddie, can I ask you a question? Is the curriculum that you've written for the program for the one day, is that sustainable, meaning year over year over year, or is it a one day and done, or your request is that, Ms. Chase and her staff look into incorporating that into a health class?
Yeah, I'm just doing this one-day event this year, and I was just wondering if you would incorporate it into the new health curriculum.
Okay. And, sorry, and will you, sorry, I apologize. After you do your program, will you be able to maybe follow up with a quick email? Nothing, I'm not trying to put, as Mr.
Yeah,
Turner says,
yeah.
a brick in your bag, just to let us know how it went and
Yeah.
the reception that you received.
I will.
And again, if it's part of your gold write-up, we'll take that. I don't want to put more work on your plate. I just was curious.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
That'd be fantastic.
Yes.
Actually, I'd like if you'd show up and talk to us and tell us how it was. I think we'd get a lot
He
more
wants
out
to
of
put
it.
a brick in your bag.
in your bag.
I think that's what your mother
Sure.
was nothing to you, so I'm going to help you.
Yeah,
with
what
that.
do you?
How many people signed up in the first day?
Oh,
I'm sorry, how many people signed up on the first day?
well, Mrs. Jaworski sent out an email on Friday, and then we collected the money today, and like the forms and stuff, and it was 13 people already did. Yeah.
Can my sixth grade daughter come?
It's 7th and 8th grade, but can she?
Next year, maybe.
Yes.
Look at you, Mom, cutting them off.
I know.
Once it's part of the curriculum, she'll get it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Look at you, huh?
Teach jujitsu.
You handle the accounting in the house now.
Teach her, I'm like you.
No, I spoke, Maddie reached out to me and I suggested that she come because I think there are changes. And I know some of the high school students have not been so enthused about the additional health requirements. And I think if, they themselves see a need for something that I think we as a board and as, administrators need to listen and see, is this something that we could possibly address and in what capacity? I think a great point that Maddie made and that I never really even thought about is that possibly the needs of our male and female students at the high school are different. And then in terms, I know we tease them out kind of at Lafayette and at younger ages, but if these are issues that some of our female students need to be college and career ready, then maybe we need to look at that differently, so. That was an all.
Thank you very much. Nice job, thank you.
That's Maddie.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Maddie.
you. Thank you. And Maddie, is it unusual to go for your gold as a sophomore? Are you a prodigy?
Well, I have until the end of high school, but I just wanted to get it, finish it this year.
So it is a little unusual.
Yeah.
Come on.
I know.
It's not bragging if you can do it. So I'm just pointing out that it's unusual that a sophomore is going for her gold award. That means she was motivated and focused and got it done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. And you don't have to stay. We know you have a ton of homework. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Nabil Moulin, Chatham Township. Thanks everyone for all the work you do for our community, and thank you very much, Maddie, for what you're doing. This is, I think, it's great. I have 2 daughters at home, so thank you directly for that. But also for our community, this is a living example that good contributions can come from everywhere. And, you know, when they are worth it, they get sometimes, hopefully included in the curriculum, and most everybody will take advantage of that. But thanks. Thanks. I come often, and I have expressed concerns in the past about the breakage that we have embedded in our budgets. And my concern was that we make sure we don't necessarily hire only on the basis of the cost of the teachers. So I would like to compliment the board, I think the staff and the department that did recruitment for, I think it's in the list, specifically for physics teacher. It's a very important topic at the year where the kids are first exposed to that topic. So I know it's not easy to sometimes make those decisions that are economically have consequences for the school district, but I would like to congratulate the community for making the right choice, which I believe brings a fair amount of experience into the staff and the faculty. So thank you very much. Often I come and say I'm worried that we're not getting people with experience, but I have to say thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Grant, for your recruiting efforts.
Jane Devlin, Chatham Township. I would like to urge that there be a district-wide break from homework in its totality during the upcoming Memorial Day holiday and recess. I want to reiterate how to access the link to Caroline Walworth's editorial presented to her Board of Ed by going to the New York Times article of April 24th entitled Push Don't Crush, which I cited at the last Board of Ed meeting in hopes the board would follow Dr. LaSousa's example, as he already did, and read the articles. I'm just bringing it up again in case folks didn't have the chance to jot down the info or may not yet have gotten to reading it, so it's just a reminder. As well, I would like to bring to attention the Washington Post article entitled Homework, an Unnecessary Evil, Surprising Findings from New Research. There is little empirical findings that homework contributes to academic achievement or success, and even when scores increase, it is by only a point or two. And in fact, proponents of homework often rationalize that homework enhances understanding or at least promotes better work habits. However, these claims are contradicted by both research and experience. Alfie Kohn, that's K-O-H-N, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, who writes and speaks widely on human behavior, education, and parenting, and is the author of at least 14 books, scores of articles, and who has lectured at educational conferences, universities, as well as parent groups and corporations, may be a starting resource for us to learn a different approach to homework. Because although research doesn't widely support the correlation between homework and success, research is showing a decline in emotional well-being of today's youth. Is that all due to homework? Of course not. If only it was that one-dimensional and basic. However, anything we can do to take the load off students seems prudent to embrace. There was just an article, either in the Record or the Ledger, I apologize, I don't recall which one, within the last 2 weeks saying the use or misuse of Adderall, which is an ADD drug, amongst college students has risen, not because the kids want to get high to party, but because they are pushing themselves to superachieve. We should be thinking about breaking that flawed and unhealthy mindset in high school so the kids don't combust in college. And we should certainly be revisiting homework and stress in general in the lower grades. Unfortunately, I see evidence to the contrary. For example, as recent as 4 years ago, homework on weekend was either not given or given infrequently for the most part at CMS. But this year, homework has been given at CMS almost every weekend. I want to advocate for bringing some new ways regarding homework to the district as planning for next year is in the works. Perhaps we can get a guest speaker or a book talk on the topic and learn much more than just what I say. I am not an expert, but I'm willing to be the one person needed to start the discussion and exchange of ideas towards change. And in closing, again, I ask that we please consider a moratorium on homework this upcoming holiday weekend. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin. Seeing no other public, oh, I'm sorry, no. Go ahead. Is anybody else, I just want to gauge the time, no, anybody else? So we'll take this public commentary, and then there's another opportunity. We'll go through the agenda and board business, and then have another opportunity for public commentary.
Hello, good evening. My name is Nancy Geyer, Inwood Road, Chatham Borough. And I just wanted to say thank you for recording the meetings, rather. I've been watching them in the comfort of my home and taking notes, and I appreciate it that I can watch it at home. So thank you for doing that and allowing us to...
You don't get it live, though, do you?
Excuse me?
You don't get it live?
No, I have Optimum.
So you do it on the...
I do not have Verizon. I get it a few days later.
Okay. I was just
Yeah.
curious if you had an in on Inwood, but no. Okay. I was going to say,
No, and they're actually posting them a lot faster, so thank you, Dr. L'Souza, for doing that. There was a lapse, and now the lapse is sort of decreasing, so thank you. There was a quick turnaround with that. So while I was watching the video of, I think it was May 4th meeting, a woman by the name of Fran Drew, which she also lives on Inwood Road, my neighbor, she was talking about possibly moving the budget vote, from April to November, and it's somewhat of a concern to me, and it's also posted in the Independent Press. I'm sure you guys saw this article about the potentially moving the vote from April to November as well. So just wanted to ask if there were some measures, actions, or conversations taken by the board and the administration about possibly moving the vote from April to November. And I understand that if the vote is moved, then we, the public, we lose our right to vote, and that is the concern for me. And I've also heard that if the cap is less than 2% and the budget is approved by the board, then the remainder of the difference of the 2% can then be pushed forward onto another budget. Is that true? Yes. Okay, Dr. L'Souza, thank you. You're shaking your head yes. Okay. So how does the public become aware of the budget and the monies if it is a sort of closed vote? That's really my concern. And so that's my first concern. And my second concern is, has the board made any decisions to, in fact, go ahead and move the vote to November? So if you or Ms. Weber can comment to that, I'd appreciate it.
and we are actually going to be talking about that at board business, but to answer your question, the board hasn't brought it up, but interestingly enough, Ms. Drew brought it up last week, and Mr. Carr brought it up the previous week. So based on that, Mr. Connors did ask Mr. DeQuilla to do some research, which we're going to talk about during board business.
Board business tonight?
Tonight,
yes.
yeah, tonight.
Great, okay,
And there's
thank
another
you.
opportunity for public commentary
Oh, good.
after that, so hopefully some of those issues or questions will be ironed out.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did all your questions get answered?
Yes, I
Okay.
think I'll see how it goes, and maybe I'll stand up
Okay,
again and
no,
ask more
that's fine, very good. I
questions.
just wanted to make sure this session's questions got answered. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stuart Carr from 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham Township. Just want to understand, the board business, that's strictly business. Will there be any vote taken concerning a potential move to November prior to the next public commentary?
No, tonight? No,
Correct.
no, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our regular agenda, and then again, we run into board business, and then there's an additional opportunity for public commentary. So starting off with personnel. Ms. Clark, if you wouldn't mind.
I move agenda items A1 through A16. This include additions to resolution L2, L5, as well as new resolutions L15 and L16 as detailed on tonight's addendum.
Second.
Just thank the two staff members who are retiring. One of them is a paraprofessional at SBS who works with our youngest kids in kindergarten, and the other is Lynn Poland, who has been directing the fall drama, the fall play, and the spring musical for the past 8 years or so.
Sorry, Peter, just 1 minute, if you wouldn't mind.
Let me know when you're ready.
How many of these new coaching staff members are, how many of them are new for the fall? Head coaching position, why is this bad? Who's new?
Girls soccer, right?
Girls soccer's new?
Yes.
And that's it?
Isn't the field hockey now?
There's an assistant field hockey in here.
Didn't we lose our field hockey coach?
Yeah, there's assistant field hockey.
We're still in the process, Rich, of
Okay, but
securing the field.
when we do appoint one, that'll be new, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Thank you,
Could you
Don.
just, how many resumes do we get for the open girls head coaching position, do you know? Is that just, is Bill LeBear know that?
For the soccer? No?
Yeah,
I can find out the exact number, yeah, which one, I don't know.
okay. You don't have to do it now, it's just whenever you get it, I just like to know what that number looks like.
It's been a tough find, which is what I think we've all expressed concern over. I think we've had a fairly high multitude of reasons at that particular position, and I know we do the best we can, and you're kind of limited with the pool of candidates that put the hat in the ring, but I really hope that we make this one work. You know, and I think we can all agree on that.
There's a meet and greet for the new coach tomorrow night.
We're very excited and think he's going to do a great job, and we'll support him in all ways we can.
No question about that. I just hope we get it right this time.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions for the administration? No? Seeing none? Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind?
Agenda items A1 through 14, and off the addendum, items A2, A5, A15, and A16. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes?
Ms. Chickarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Mr. Franz.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes, thank you.
Agenda items passed 6-0.
Moving on to finance and facilities, Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes, I'd like to move action items 1 through 7 on your regular agenda and number 8 on your addendum.
Second.
8 on the addendum.
Just one, thank you from to the Chatham Athletic Boosters, an amount of $1,100 for the purchase of new flags at Haas Field.
The flags on top of the bleachers, those flags, or American flags?
New flags on top of the bleachers.
Okay, thank you.
That's on top of the bleachers.
Yeah.
For like Cougar Weekend?
Yeah, but I think the flags that they've had of recent, pretty worn.
Mhm.
And the boosters, somebody brought it to the boosters' attention, and yet again, they stood up. So yes, they'll be along the top.
Nice. Yours thing still didn't come in, huh? Your donation? Oh, good. Did it hit the agenda? Oh, it will come in, okay, sorry. Got it. Does anybody else have any additional questions for Peter? No, seeing none? Mr. DeQuilla?
Agenda items B1 through B7 and B8 from the addendum. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Ms. Chickarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Ms. Franz. Mr. Franz, sorry.
And her too, yes.
Well, she told you to.
In fact, where is Chris? Get her up here.
You're on to me.
You like her better anyway.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes, thank you.
Agenda items passed 6-0.
Thank you. We're going to move on to curriculum, and because Lotta left us high and dry because she got tickets to the Rangers game, I'm going to ask Ms. Ciccarelli if she wouldn't mind moving the curriculum items.
And let me just jump in, Ms. Ciccarelli. We've got calendars under, in a resolution here, but it's also under board business for discussion. So I don't know if you want me to give you some feedback on the calendars and discuss it now, or do you want to wait till board business and then move those two agenda items during board business?
Yeah, can we do that? Can we move those?
Yes.
And then this way we can,
Actually, one to two.
so, yeah, Ann, would you mind switching that to C1 to C2?
Yep.
And I apologize for the complication.
That's okay.
That was
I'd
not a
like to-
setup.
I'd like to move agenda item C1 to C2 on your regular agenda.
Second.
And this is the new wording, Dr. LaSousa?
Yes.
I'd have to compare it to the old, okay. Okay, any additional questions on C1 and C2, holding questions for 3 and 4 till board business? Seeing none, Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind?
Agenda item C1 and C2. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Mr. Friend. And Ms. Weber.
Yes, thank you.
Agenda items passed 6-0.
And there are no policy items, correct?
Correct.
Okay, it says item D1, but then it says no items. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Franz, for being at the ready on that one. Moving on to board business, if we don't mind, can we do the calendars, the spring one first, and then talk about the 16-17 school year?
Perfect.
So again, just to refresh everybody's memory, 15-16, because of park testing, and where the park testing falls versus AP testing, we wanted to move the spring break up closer to, I believe, our Good Friday break. Which I believe in the,
No, it's just moving it to mid-April.
oh, it doesn't coincide with?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, the other one does though, Jill, the 16,
Oh, okay, the
17.
16-17?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we're just bumping this up a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so I just would mention, you might recall that I was going to get some feedback and so forth. I haven't received any negative feedback, only positive feedback about the change to the 15-16 calendar, and it really is a non-issue in terms of staff and any parents who've contacted me. Most seem to approve of the change.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any objections to the spring calendar for 15-16? Okay, so hold that thought, and now let's move over to the 16-17 calendar. Dr. LaSousa, can you share your results of that?
Sure, so 16, 17, as you can see, I think, I think you got a quick little just summary of the survey responses. Among parents, calendar 4 was the first choice, I guess, if you will. Among the staff, calendar 2 was the preference, and that was also the second choice of parents. And then, yep, sorry,
One more time, which was the favorite among the parents
calendar 4,
and the staff?
calendar 2.
Thank you.
So they both, so everyone's supporting a February break and an April break.
Right, I was going to say, so that what they have in common is that they end the school year later, and there's a February break. The difference in those two calendars is just around the Columbus Day and Jewish holiday in October.
Okay.
And then I received feedback, one parent emailed me saying that it's good when the break, the April break coincides with Passover for a variety of reasons. But another family, as well as a clergy person from town, said that they prefer to not have the break coincide with Holy Week because it, in the case of the clergy person, reduces the congregation size among the houses of worship. So I shared with him that I would bring that feedback to the board. I will say we have often had spring break right before Easter because then we don't, in order to have a full break, you only really need to use 4 days because you're always going to have Good Friday off no matter what. So that's kind of been our standard practice in many years. But this person was, inquiring as to whether it might make more sense to move the break, back a week or to some other time. And in this case, with all these calendars, we wouldn't want to move it to the following week because if there's a budget vote in April, it would likely be on the 18th. So the option probably would be to move it up a week. but doing so would then require the final day of school to be Monday, June 26th, or, and that's, no one's going to want to do that, I understand that, or take away the February break, you know, which ends up putting, winds up moving you back to one of the calendars that wasn't the top choice among the parents and staff.
Are we required, when we look at May, those 2 unused snow days, they're just buffered in there as protection? Like, we can't?
They're part of our negotiated agreement
Okay,
with the
just wanted
teachers.
to double check that. Okay, thank you.
And just to read your statistics, the first choice amongst parents was calendar 1, correct?
No.
Calendar 4,
Yeah,
calendar 4, and,
There's only really one day difference.
yeah, it's just the Columbus Day, right,
Yeah.
between the two?
Right.
Let's see.
Choice, choice 24-hour walk.
They're same thing except for one day.
Well, and if you look at the poll, it's just a walk
Right,
between first.
yeah.
Yeah, and just a reminder too, it's not
What do we do?
essential that you vote on this tonight. You can vote on the change to 15-16 tonight, and you could carry this to June 1st. I mean, that's not
think
impossible.
we're
We do have
ready. I
some
just-
folks calling us to, you know, wondering when the.
Right, 2
when
and
the days
4,
are.
Oh, ask them if anyone has anything.
I mean, to me, it's flipping a coin, so 2 and 4 are negligible. Anybody in the audience have a preference between 2 and 4?
I like it.
You like 2? Phil likes 2? You like 4? Great, we're split again.
All right.
That's not very helpful. Rich doesn't care.
The staff preferred 2?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Why?
Why? They have to work on.
Because they didn't have because a 4
Yeah, I'm
was
looking.
a staff-only day.
They have that Monday off.
But then,
It just gives us a longer weekend.
it's just moving one from the other. Oh, I see.
Because Joe, I
It-
think everybody's a 40.
6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah, I mean, I can't read
Yeah.
the same.
Is flipping a coin allowed at the legal
No.
level? Heads or tails?
What's that, sorry, Matt?
Is flipping a coin
No
legal
matter
at the?
what, we're getting it on the 23rd.
I'm fine
so
with
there's
4.
no-
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
4? Is
I'm
everybody
fine
good
with 4, that's the consensus.
Give the parents something.
We're going to go with 4.
I feel like if we ask for people's
Look out for
opinion,
number 2.
So can I ask Ms. Ciccarelli to move items 3 and 4 now? Ann, would you mind circling back and doing C3 and C4 now?
I'd like to move agenda items C3 and C4 on the regular agenda.
Second.
I do just want to clarify on agenda item C4, it is calendar number 4 that is being.
Yes.
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 Yes, sorry, calendar number 4. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Agenda items passed 6-0.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our second topic in board business. Again, this was brought up to Ms. Geisler's point. A couple weeks ago, Mr. Carr brought it up just in the form of a question, anybody, the board talking about it. We had just come off the referendum, so it wasn't even a thought. And then coincidentally, Ms. Drew came up the following board meeting and asked, why don't we hold it in November when there's a general election when there's probably a larger voter turnout. It wasn't a lengthy conversation, but she asked Mr. DeQuilla to provide the statute, essentially that what gives the school board the right to hold it in April. I'm paraphrasing for sure, but again, she was just asking about, April versus November and from a voter turnout. And based on those pieces of conversation, then Mr. Connors had just asked Mr. DeQuilla to do some additional research, which, Peter, I believe you have completed that research, and we'd like to just review it now.
Yes, I have. For everyone's information, the answers to the questions that Mr. Connors asked via Ms. Weber at the last meeting are in everyone's board packet. I don't know if you'd like me to read them or if you want to go through them one by one.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Connors on this. Mr. Connors, what would be your preference?
I'll ask the question, you can answer it.
There we
How
go.
about
Okay.
There we go.
that? Number of districts in the beautiful state of New Jersey.
There are 558 school districts in New Jersey, excluding vocational districts, CSSD districts, Ed Service Commission, and jointure districts.
How many districts hold elections on their budgets? In other words, how many districts like us will put their budget up to vote?
Well, I have to clarify, I don't think there are many districts like Chatham, but there are 16 districts in the state that still have April budget elections. There are 4 K-8 districts and 12 K-12 districts. And the law that permits the districts to move their April budget vote to November was passed in January of 2012.
So of the 558 school districts, only 16 are putting their budgets to vote?
That is correct. The 16 districts, there are 2 in Morris County, which are Riverdale and Chatham. In Bergen County, Cliffside Park, Fairview, Garfield, Hackensack, Oakland, and Palisades Park vote. In Cumberland, the town of Bridgeton votes. In Essex County, Irvington is the only voting district. In Hudson County, it's North Bergen and Weehawken, Middlesex, New Brunswick, Monmouth County, Neptune, and in Passaic County, the city of Passaic and Totowa vote on their budget.
Okay, well, we'll get to that question in a moment. Let's get back. When did that law pass where you could go with the budget being, not being a vote?
It passed in January of 2012, and at that point, districts started moving their elections from April to November, up until the point where now there are only 16 districts that voted last April.
Peter, was there, and I know this wasn't one of my questions, but has that been a growing trend? Did a number of districts jump on it right after the law became available, or has this been a growing trend throughout the districts in New Jersey?
I don't have the exact numbers, but from memory, there were quite a few that went the first year, more the second year, and third, and this into the third year, a few more. There
Each
were
year, more and more?
Yeah, each year more and more. The number of remaining voting districts dwindles every year.
And jumping around a little bit on you, Peter, but just staying on that, once a district decides to go to a non-vote or a November vote, are you wedded to that forever, or can the district swing back?
Basically, when the law was passed, they said that if the board or a township passes a resolution to move the election, so the district's Board of Ed can pass the resolution, or the town council of the district, or in our case, the 2 town councils can pass resolutions to move the vote without the board's approval. The original law said that once you moved the election, you had to stay with November for 4 years before the board could move back. I do not know if the 4 years ran from 2012 onward, or if it runs from 4 years from the date you move it. That I could not find clarification on.
Has there been any indication, although I think I don't know if we have the full 4 years in, that any district has gone back?
The full,
500 some odd that went to the non-vote, did any go back?
none have moved back.
The cost of the vote to the district,
For Chatham, the April 2014 election cost $11,200. Unfortunately, the County Board of Election has not submitted the expenses for April 2015 yet. They're not finished, or they don't have them ready. But I anticipate that the cost will be more because we had longer election hours. We had voting hours from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. instead of the typical hours of 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. So we will have to pay additional hours for poll workers.
so over the last few years, on average, we've been paying about $11,000 for the April vote,
That is correct.
and that's for the budget, correct?
That's correct.
And if we switch, now I know there are votes in November. Does the November vote cost the district any money?
If we had, currently, when we don't have anything voted on in November, no. If we move the budget vote to, or the budget vote or the Board of Education member vote to November, there would be no charge because both the borough and the township are required to have their general elections. So we'd actually be piggybacking on them. The only thing they can potentially bill us for if our items being voted on increase the cost of the mailing or the ballot, which would be negligible, if anything.
Okay. So that would be about $11,000 savings annually.
That is correct.
We're J district, correct?
In the old terms, the state's ranking, yes.
Are there any other J districts that currently have votes on their budgets?
No, there are not.
There's districts that we are well, we try to equate ourselves to, the Lawrenceville, Millburns, and Summits. Do any of those surrounding districts have votes?
Our surrounding and like districts, which Dr. D'Souza uses as reference in the budget presentations of Millburn, Summit, Madison, New Providence, Livingston, Westfield, Bernards, and Mountain Lakes, none of those districts have April elections.
And the only other district in Morris County, I believe I heard you say, is Riverdale that has a...
That is correct. That's the only Morris County district other than Chatham that has an election.
Is Riverdale sorry, Rich, I'm sorry. Is Riverdale K to 12? No, it's not. So it's not even a totally fair comparison.
What is Riverdale?
Yeah,
It is K-8.
yeah, it's K8 versus a K to 12. Okay, thank you.
But it's definitely not a K to 12.
No, it is a K-8 district.
So in terms of K to 12, Chatham's the only district, the only school district in Morris County that has an equal vote.
That is correct.
Just one more time on this, Peter, is if we voted, if it's the statute, there's a 2% cap. So explain to me one more time what that November vote would entail, and when a vote is required and when one is not. So let's go the 2%. Walk me through that.
The district,
Walk me through that, please.
all of the school districts follow budget regulations with an imposed cap of 2%. So the district can propose a budget under cap guidelines, and there are also some other caveats to the cap guidelines, which the state allows districts to have waivers for expensive pensions, health benefits, and a few other items, which can drive your budget above 2%, and you'd still be within the cap guidelines. The other thing that the districts can do, if they don't use all of their taxing authority, they accumulate what is called bank cap, which you have the ability to utilize for 3 years. So either a waiver or a bank cap can put you above 2% budget increase, but still have you within the confines of the regulation. So if the district follows the cap guidelines and presents a budget within the cap restrictions, the only thing that's voted on in November is the Board of Education members. If the district decided that it wanted to present a second question to go above the cap requirements, both the second question and the Board of Ed members would be voted on in November. If the district wanted to propose a referendum, the only time the referendums can be voted on would either be January, March, September, or December, or you can vote on it in November with your budget election or with your Board of Education election. So those are the items that get voted on. So if the district follows the cap guidelines, the public does not get the vote on the budget.
But if it's a second question that tips the budget over 2%, that is the subject of a vote.
That would be the subject of the vote in addition to the Board of Education members.
Gotcha. And if there's a referendum which tips it over the 2%, that is also the subject of a vote.
If the district decided to put the referendum out in November, that would be a third item voted on.
Whenever you put it out, it would be the
Yes.
subject
Yeah,
of the vote.
referendums are always subject to public vote.
And if you said something about the waivers and everything else, but at some point, let's say the budget was going to exceed the 2% cap. And that would be, just for whatever reason, we were going to vote on something that we were going to do, and that would require a vote, correct?
It is correct, because in order to exceed the cap, the district would have to propose a second question for the excess above the cap. And that would be, the second question would be voted on.
So the only time there would be no vote is if we were proceeding in accordance with the mandate of the 2% cap, subject to any waivers and the like, correct?
That is correct.
And if, let's just say we keep the vote in April and the budget is voted down, what happens then to the Board of Education budget?
If the public,
No, rejects.
if the public rejects, I was gonna say opposes, opposes the budget and rejects the budget gets presented to both the borough and the township governments. The borough and township governments have the right to review the documents and all of the financial information. They need to agree on a dollar amount, of which they want the budget to be reduced. And they can make suggestions as to what the district should reduce out of the budget, but it is ultimately up to the administration and the board to determine what gets cut to equal that dollar amount.
Or the council could, they don't have to reduce it.
No, they can say they like the budget as it is, or they can say you should take $5 out, or they
Can
can
they
say you can
increase
take
it?
500,000 out.
Can they increase it?
They can increase the budget as well, too.
So instead of this 9 people deciding, it's a different set of 9 people deciding.
Actually, no, it wouldn't be 9, it would be the members of the Borough Council and the
Well,
members
there's
of
5
the...
and 5, right?
Oh, okay, then.
I was assuming 1 was absent.
Yes, and I,
They can pass it
What was
as
that
is,
Rangers game?
though. They can pass it as is, though.
in prior districts, the township administrator as well as the finance officer usually sits on that council, reviewing the budget and proposing, I think feeds them the information of what they think should be done.
But they can take the budget as is and pass it.
They can leave the budget as is and say, no, I approve the budget, or as Ms. Weber said, they can say, no, I think you should add more, or you need to cut. They can,
Do they do their portion? I'm sorry, Matt, if I cut. I apologize. Do they just do their portion, or, like, it's 2 different municipalities, so are they just talking about their portion of the budget, or no, they talk about it in totality?
No, for a regional district, they have to talk about it in total. So
Okay.
they need to decide, for argument's sake, that 200,000 needs to be cut out of the budget. They both have to agree. One can't say, I want 300, and one can't say, I want 100. They have to agree on one number for the entire district. Even though the tax basis gets divided up differently, they have to agree on one set number to reduce, or if we want to dream, increase the budget.
Right. As I'm saying, if somebody, they wanted to increase the budget to build something or turf something, they summarily will just extend the taxing authority, and then, or it's a dollar amount. We don't have to do, it's not, the borough council or the township council can't say, I want to increase it to turf the high school field. It's only a dollar amount, and it's up to the administration to decide and the board. Okay,
I have only seen dollar amounts be mandated before.
okay.
So if they said a percentage, it would equate to a dollar amount anyway.
Okay, but they couldn't dictate this dollar amount is to be spent on, a particular item.
I do not believe they can mandate, they can suggest how the district either spend money or reduce money out of the budget, but it's up to the district to make the final
They
decision.
would give it, based on past precedent, is they would say, if they say cut it by 200,000, we come back with the cuts. They
Correct.
can't- There's no line item veto in essence, so they say cut it by 200 grand, and we go back in and look for 200 grand, and then we go back to them and present it.
They may come back, and this is only an example, and I don't want to get anybody up in arms, they may come back and say, oh, you need to, you can save 3 teachers by reducing class size. The district may say, thank you very much, but the district may decide to find $200,000 or whatever that dollar amount is elsewhere to make up the item they want to reduce out of the budget. The district has the final say in the items that get reduced if the borough or township determine to cut the budget in case of a budget defeat.
Okay, but if they felt strongly, for example, about full-day kindergarten, they could say increase it by 800,000 because that's what it would cost, even though we don't have the buildings.
They can't.
But they couldn't say you need to implement full-day kindergarten.
No,
even-
They wouldn't be able to go and tell us to go above 2% plus bank cap. They can't, in essence, give us an unfunded mandate. So they have to.
No, because they have the taxing authority.
Yes, but that's outside of,
Is the 2% still apply?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, never mind.
Do you know, Peter, just since the majority of districts in the state have moved in this direction, what does the budget process look like in terms of, it seems, if you were to do a second question and that has to roll out in November, it seems tricky, when you're looking at your budget, when that's usually around the time of year that the budget is sort of for the following year, just coming, the seeds are being planted. So in your experience, talking to other business administrators, maybe you don't have this answer tonight, like how is that working elsewhere, since we're not doing it here? And also, my second part of the question is, in terms of our budget, even though the budget wouldn't be voted on, I would have to assume we would still have our typical budget forums where we would, open up for input and, if we were to go that road, the budget still would be discussed openly so that we would get input. So my first question is, how is it working elsewhere with that in November versus April, which is a big difference? And
I'm going to take the easy road and answer your questions in reverse order.
okay, go for it.
For all of the neighboring BAs that I've encountered over the last 2 months in meetings, and especially over the last 3 weeks, basically their budget process, it follows almost the same timeline as ours, where they go through the meetings and prepare a budget. They do, and Dr. LaSusse and I have talked about this, we would continue to go to the PTOs, we would continue to have open public budget meetings with finance. Our budget still has to go to the county in March and April for their review. We still have to have a open public meeting, a budget approval by the board, and it gets approved, similar timetable that we do now, whereas instead of the end of March, it gets approved by the beginning of April. So the budget that follows or complies with the guideline still gets approved at the same time, so that the district can move forward and have the budget in place for July 1st. The issue with the second question gets a little tricky because I have not found another district that has a November election that has proposed the second question yet. What happens with the second question, whatever the item the district decides to propose, it gets the funding after the item is approved in November. So that the district, even though it's a few months into its school year, gets the additional funds as of, and we'll, for argument's sake, we'll pick the date of November 15th, just for clarification. So as of November 15th, the district gets the full additional amount for the second question. The district can then implement and spend the money. If the district is not able to encumber and or spend the full amount of the second question, any of excess or unencumbered money falls back to the taxpayers in the subsequent second year of the budget. So for example, in 2015-16, if we had a second question, we did not encumber all of the money by June of 16. The excess funds would flow into the 17-18 budget as free balance.
And I think when the law was passed, the intention was to protect the taxpayers and to keep districts at that 2% and make it very difficult. Everything I read as it was coming out was to make it difficult to go above and beyond that, so.
It is a little cumbersome if the district wanted a second question, because depending what your item is, it's very difficult or it's impossible to implement something for a full school year when you only get money in November. So it is very hard to use the second question funds for curricular staff members, unless you're able to implement a program starting in January. Because you have to remember, you cannot hire anyone until you have the money, so that you could not start I guess you could start interviewing, but you cannot offer employment until after the second question is approved.
But if you procure the funds November 15th, can you implement the program? Let's use the technology from a couple of years ago. We raised $460,000 specifically to implement a program. If we did that in moving the vote to November, could we implement it the following September?
Yes, you could.
Okay.
You would then, if you did not spend any of the funds in the year it was approved, it would go back to the taxpayers as part of the free balance.
But it would be there for the September?
It would be there for the second year, yes.
Okay.
When you say year, calendar year or school year?
These are all school years.
I'm sorry, just following up on Michelle's comments. we would go through the same process, all the open hearings and all the open finance meetings and everything else that we do with regard to getting out the information as to the proposed budget and what we're recommending we spend money on and things of the like, correct?
That is correct. We would still do, Dr. LaSousa and I would still meet with all of the PTOs. We'd still have the open public finance meetings, and we'd still have a public budget hearing for the board to approve the budget after it was approved by the county superintendent.
And the presentations to the councils, the township and the borough.
Yes, I forgot about those.
I mean, this isn't a question, this is just more of an observation. I find it ironic that if the budget is voted down, the borough council and the borough township will propose as to what we do, but it's my understanding is that the borough doesn't let us vote on their budget, does it?
The taxpayers in both the borough and the township do not vote on either the borough or the township
Neither
budgets.
the township nor the borough put to vote what their proposed budgets are, correct?
Correct.
And what is their cap?
They follow a similar 2% with, guidelines as the district.
My borough taxes went up 6.7% 2 years ago. What happened to that cap?
I would think you'd have to go back and ask
Give
how
us a
they
line
had
of that.
waivers or pulled other money out.
I didn't think they had a cap.
No, they have a 2% cap.
Okay. I gotta talk to Lonnie.
They do have a cap, but we don't get to vote on that. The historical data regarding the numbers of people, forget the borough versus the township, just as a whole, excluding those years that we do not have, excluding the years that we had a second question or a year that we had a referendum, which I think would be 2006 to 2012. It looks, just reading the numbers, it looks like the average vote turnout for the two was about 20% of the electorate.
That is correct. Going
I can
from,
appreciate in April 2012, there was a 14%, and in 2010, there was a 32% turnout. So we'll just use those are the two ends, correct?
that is correct.
So we'll use those as outliers, so the rest of it appears to be hovering between the 19 to 21% of the people who vote, right?
That is correct. Typically, for the school budget election in April, there's a total of about 20% of all the registered voters that come out to vote.
I give up. How many registered voters are there?
13,000. Alan?
How many, Alan?
13,700.
And my math stinks, that means 20% is how many people are voting on our budget?
2,600.
I'm not a math guy.
2,600.
Help me out.
Even if you
So about
look
20,
at second
so about 2,000 plus people are voting on our
3,000,
budget?
less than 3,000 people.
Okay, thank you.
And 80% are presumably happy with the way things are going?
Or they're just not paying attention. But even in 2013 and 14, we had second questions, it was low turnout, relative to the others. So it's pretty consistent whether it's second question or not, who's coming up.
Give them a referendum, we'll get them out of it.
That's all the questions I had, thank you very much.
No problem. If
And
anybody
Rich,
else
even
has
if
any
you-
questions, happy to ask.
Sorry. And Richie, just these numbers, I mean, just quickly running through, it's 23.4% if you capture all, count the referendums, count the second questions, count the highs. It's, it's still 23%. It's not like it tips the needle.
And I'm sorry, has there been any press or any bad criticism of doing it, of going with the November vote? Has there been any feedback or any backlash with regard to those districts that did it?
I don't think any of the districts that have
16 out of
moved.
558, that's an amazing number to me. And I know there's going to be a reference to a bunch of lemmings, but that's an impressive number. So explain, has there been any backlash about those districts that have gone?
Out of all the BAs that I've spoke to, none of them seem unhappy about not having an April election or having the budget going.
Peter, I can appreciate why the BAs and the administrations of the world, I can appreciate why the administrations and the BAs of the world would not have it. My question is, have there been any from the people? Has there been any backlash from the voters or the boards or anything saying this was a mistake or anything?
To the best of my knowledge, there has not been any public backlash.
The School Boards Association did conduct some kind of survey maybe 2 years ago, Rich. And I think that the most notable concern was the placement of board members' names on the ballot, because they were concerned that there was a politicization of the candidates for Board of Education.
So the
But there's information about that on the school board's website. I haven't read that in some time.
So to the extent that you recall any issues that had to do with placement of the people running, as opposed to removing the vote from the people when it's below 2% cap. Is that it, Mike?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
Thank you. Again, that's all the questions I have.
Did you have a question? Oh, no. Does anybody else have any additional questions for Peter or any additional conversation they want to have on this topic?
No, I just did want to follow up on the event that we spoke about 2 weeks ago, which was a clinic sponsored by the 8th grade Chatham Lacrosse Club and the ECLC in Chatham. It was an unbelievable, massive success, and it was an extraordinary event. We had about 80 of our 8th grade boys and girls lacrosse players go up, and we did a 45-minute clinic at the ECLC. We had music. Each one of the children of ECLC got personal attention. Our children either paired up and single-handedly taught the kids how to play whatever we could in terms of lacrosse. It was an absolute extraordinary day to watch the children of Chatham really step up and just exemplify, I think, what we've done as a district in terms of giving back to the community. I think our children learned about as much as they could in terms of A, how lucky they are, B, but how they can make a difference by giving back and working with other children. My favorite one, there was a young boy there that 7 years ago was fine, but had some form of the virus, and now that child is blind, has issues with walking, and has issues with maintaining his overheating. So he was constantly monitored by student aides that were putting ice packs on his neck to keep him cool. And they kept on saying, because it was hot that day, and they kept on asking him, "Do you want to go in?" And not only the child did he not want to go in, but they said afterwards that's the first time they've seen this young man smile in about 5 years. So he had an absolute phenomenal day to see what our kids can do when they're asked to really step up and work with the kids within the ECLC. So that being said, it's going to be an annual event every year as long as the district continues to support it. I think we should. I actually think we should look for more opportunities as a district to take on events like this. I think our kids learned more that day than they can in most other circumstances. And I will tell you the feedback from the children was fantastic in terms of really not understanding what they were going into, but leaving with something special to go home. And I got a lot of comments from parents who are kind of, who basically get one-word answers from their children in terms of how was your day, and good is usually what they get. But the kids were really excited to go home and tell their parents all about what they did that day and what they learned. So I would recommend, I don't know how we do it, I do know that the football team at the varsity level does a clinic at the ECLC as well. I think we should support, and I think we should go to the coaches and all the different areas within the district and say, what can we do to take time as a school district to find ways and opportunities to give back to as many places as we can, and make that, in essence, almost part of our curriculum, to support not only the local community, but in any way that we can. So it was worth every bit of effort. Once again, it will be going to hopefully an annual basis, but I'd like to expand that and look for ways to expand these programs across district-wide.
Well, thank you, Matt. My son participated in the football version of it, and they had a great experience similar to what you just spoke about. Dr. D'Souza, just a quick question before we move on. Do we have an executive session scheduled? None? We do not. We do none tonight. Does anybody else have any additional board business they'd like to bring up? No?
I do, just kind of, if I may.
Sure.
kind of Going back to that.
Yeah.
What's the mechanism if we wanted to do that? How do we go about doing it, or how does it get accomplished?
If the district decided that it wanted to move the election from April to November, it needs to pass a board resolution 61 days prior to the next April vote and send that resolution to the county, the Morris County Clerk. So we would have to decide by, for argument's sake, February 1st.
We did it February, let's say, just for purposes of conversation, we wanted to do that. Would the April vote, tell me what happens April 2016 with regard to the budget?
If
Just mechanically.
February 1st, the district passed the resolution to move the budget vote from April to November. That would get sent to the county. For the budget season, the district would proceed as normal, as we've discussed, with the administration and myself preparing the budget and creating the budget, going through all of the meetings with the PTOs, the public, the open sessions with the public, presenting the budget to the county for its review, or the county superintendent and county business official for their review. And then once it was approved, presenting it to the town council, and again, the board, and having an open public hearing. That budget would get voted on, as long as it's within the cap, would be approved by the board. That would be the budget we would use for the the 16-17 school year. The board members that would have expiring terms in April of 16 automatically get extended through November of 16 until the next election.
So the only thing that happens is that the people running for election, they get moved to November, but the budget process, at least internally, remains the same as to what we would do along the same timetable and when the budget has to be presented to the county.
That is correct. And the only thing that administratively becomes, that is done differently is right now the district has a reorganization meeting in April after the budget election. The district has some items that it needs to reorganize in April or May once the budget is approved, and then it has items that it has to vote again for reorganization in January as a result of the November board election.
Okay. Oh, sure.
Can you find out about that 4-year statute, if it was effective 2012, or if it's, like,
It's 4 years from the time you move it.
Okay.
And it also, I believe, I'm 99% sure, that if you are a regional district, any of the municipal governing bodies can vote you back. It doesn't have to be the majority of the, like, in a district where there are 5 sending communities, if one of them votes to go back to April, the Board of Education has to go back to April.
So can I just clarify one thing? You said it needs to be voted on in call it February 1st, and then presented to the county. If in fact we do move it, does that still, it still is taking place in April, just to clarify, it's still taking place in April as far as the money goes behind the scenes, although there's just no vote on it. Is that correct? The time frame remains the same?
Correct. The time frame for preparing the budget remains almost identical, whether we have a budget vote in April or we had no budget, or the Board of Education vote in November. So the time frame for preparing the budget and getting all of the necessary budget approvals remains almost the same.
Got it.
We have a June 30th fiscal year.
Correct. Our fiscal
Okay,
year
so
runs
what
July
happens-
1 to June
What happens
30.
basically at that point is, in essence, the budget is extrapolated across as is between July 1st and the November election, correct?
No, the budget,
Hold on a second. So say, because you have to think about that from a perspective of, we have a increase in teacher salaries baked into those figures, right? So we go from July 1st through the November election, in essence, without those increased dollars.
no.
So how is that accounted for? How do we, so we have, if we don't pass a budget on April, whatever the day is, okay, we have an increase in our budgeted items at that next fiscal year. So how are those dollars accounted for in the first 5 months of that cycle when we don't have, in essence, the taxing authority until that November date?
The item you're, I think, getting confused on, if the district wants to have move the election from April to November, if the district is within the cap guidelines, the only thing the public votes on is the Board of Education.
So in
members.
essence, you get an early look in the November
Correct.
election.
Once in the April timeframe, when the county superintendent and the county business official approve the budget, and the Board of Education then approves the district budget, the district is finalized and going.
I got you.
So if you went from 50 million to 51 million, basically as of July 1st, I have my new budget of $51 million to spend.
Okay.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a lag in between that.
No.
Okay.
Because we submitted it to the county and the Department of Education, and we still did all
We
the...
followed all of the necessary steps, except the public does not get, you're within the cap guidelines. The only thing that's removed in the April to November is the public's right to vote on the budget.
Okay.
Okay. Are there additional questions or discussion topics on this, or anything else? No? So now we have our second opportunity for public commentary. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, sign in.
My name is Alan Ruth in Chatham Township, 82 Fairview. Concerning the potential for our district to move to a November election, I think it is very risky for us to do that because of the kind of district we are. And by that I mean, think of 2010 when Trenton took $2.6 million out of our state aid at the end of March, effective July 1st, right? 85% of our state aid disappeared in one fell swoop. We had an April election. We put some extra money in the budget to make up for part of that removal of the $2.6 million in state aid as a second question, or as part of the budget. I forget if we even had a second question. I think it was a second question at the time. No? So anyway, we were able to consider how to live with that $2.6 million cut for that April election. So today we get about $2.4, $2.5, $2.6 million in state aid, right? $2.5 million. $2 million. Okay, so $2 million in state aid. Trenton can cut that any time. And they're going to tell us at the end of March, when the budget is announced for the state, if that money is cut or not. They could cut it back to zero. They could cut the entire $2 million. We know that districts like ours, the J districts, get very little sympathy from Trenton. And if the state is in trouble budget-wise, and we know the state is in trouble budget-wise all the time, we could get that entire amount or some part of it cut. So if we have no budget vote in April, we have no chance to put a second question on the ballot to try to restore some of that money. So $2 million is about 20 teachers. You know, that's 24 teachers. That's a lot of teachers. So if we get that cut out of our budget, and the only degree of freedom we have is to cut 20 teachers or 24 teachers as of July 1st, and we have no option for a second question, we're stuck. That's a risk for us. There's another risk that Mr. Gilfillan has already mentioned, and that is the state is now actively talking about pushing pension cost and health care cost for annuitants, for teachers who are annuitants, who are supposed to be paid for by the state. If they push that back to us, they're probably going to do that effective July 1st. You know, it's going to be some new school budget year. So there's an additional $3 million that can be pushed back on us. So there's like $5 million that's a risk for us that Trenton could push back on us. And if we don't have an April election to consider that as a second question to make up for part of that, we're stuck. Now in November we could pass something, but by then, as we've just discussed, if between July and November you've had to get rid of 24 teachers, you can't hire, they can't be in your payroll July 1st, and then after the November election you have a second question and you pass it and okay, you can hire them back for January. Think of the impact that's going to have on our district. So that's the biggest concern I have. And the other piece of data is, you know that how far below other districts we are in our cost per student. We are much more efficient than other districts in our in our peer group and in the state. So another way to look at that is we're much leaner. We have much less to cut than a Mountain Lakes or a Melbourne or a Summit. If we have to cut out of our programs, it's going to be a much bigger percentage of our base than those other districts. So for them, going to November is much less risky. Much less risky. For us, because we're so lean, because we have such a low cost, it's very risky. So amongst all the other reasons that we wouldn't want to go to November, like voting on the budget, I would submit to you that the biggest reason not to go to November is the risk that would be entailed by doing that. Thank you.
I think Mr. Ruth is right, and it speaks to, in one of his points, and it speaks to what you were getting at, Matt, which is, I believe, and Mr. DeCula can correct me if I'm wrong, districts that move to November, they still need to submit to the county in April, even if they're going over the cap, the tax levy cap, they still need to submit a base budget that is approved. They still have to, begin the school year in September. The portion upon which the voters vote, I believe, is the difference, is the amount that the budget exceeds the allowable tax levy increase. So they're not, I don't think that the voters vote on the entire budget. If the whole budget is 2% over the 2% cap, they don't vote on that whole thing. They only vote on the 2% difference. But the place where I'm not sure, the place where I think that there's some assumptions in what Mr. Ruth said, and the main one is that in the past, when the state has cut significant sums of aid, like in 2010, it permitted districts to offset the loss of state aid with taxing authority. So it could be that if the state were to cut back on aid again, the board then would have greater taxing authority and could make up the difference without having to go to a vote in November. So it really depends on how something like that would shake out. Same thing with all of the other threats that are on the horizon, potential threats that are on the horizon in terms of state of New Jersey. So in that case, then, you'd have to debate whether the board would be in a better position to be able to exercise its taxing authority by adopting a budget that was within the regulations, or if it was a greater risk to have to go out to voters to increase the budget by, say, 10%, which is almost what the increase was in 2010. So it really would depend, I think, on how the cuts are structured and what the recourse is for a Board of Education.
Richard Reardon, 29 Van Dorn Avenue, in Chatham Borough. I really have a question to the board. Approximately a year ago, I came to the board when there was an article in the paper about cutting back on the theater arts program in the middle school. And I made a suggestion at the time, if you're looking to save the money, the cost of that program that was discussed, you could save that by switching the elections from April to November. And the board said, whoa, we've already we've discussed that in detail, we've gone through everything, and our decision is that the April election is the best thing for the borough and the township, school district of the Chathams. That's what I was told, that had been discussed.
I was on the board, and just to clarify, it was so new, we wanted to wait and see how it played out.
Well,
and I can quote that, you can go, well, you can't.
well, I don't have the transcript.
But
I have the transcript, I don't have the transcript. My recollection was it had been discussed in detail and was decided against doing that. And surprisingly enough, I got a call from Mr. Carr subsequent to that, asking me why did I want to give up a vote on the budget. And I said, well, I figured, nobody's going to try to do an end run or anything like that. All of a sudden, this past election comes along, and you really get a true sense. 68% of the people, all for the operating budget, and for the other question with respect to that, it was like the reverse, and it was across the board. And now, if I understand correctly, now all of a sudden, let's move the election to November, which presumably would remove that from the public who had indicated a desire. My question is to the members sitting on the board, Is that the reason all of a sudden this is up here, we're gonna make the change? Because I can't believe, after being told a year ago, that we've talked about it, we've thought about it, and that isn't what we want to do. We want to keep the April date, and now all of a sudden there's an adverse decision, and now we're gonna move it. So if you would, I think you owe that to the public, to me and everybody else.
It's very simple. The only reason it was brought up is Mr. Carr and Ms. Drew brought it up.
With respect to moving it to November?
Yes.
Well, it was represented to me that it had been thought out and decided against. What I want to
I
know
can't
is,
answer what was
other
represented
than
to you. I can
the,
only answer why we are talking about it tonight.
other than the vote, I'm saying is, if the vote had been the same for the first question and the second question, would we even be having this discussion? I think probably not.
I can't
And that's
give-
what I
that's
find to be,
speculation. I can't
I find
answer
that to
that.
be embarrassing. I think if,
Well, I take offense to that. We're bringing it up because Mr. Carr and Ms. Drew brought it up. Two members of the public brought it up. We said we'd talk about it during board business. Here we are.
okay,
So you can't be offensive and not, expect an answer. We are talking about it because Mr. Carr and Ms. Drew brought it up. And Mr. Connors, based on that, asked for additional research. So we can do due diligence and do an analysis.
well, I just think the timing, I hate to say this.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well,
That goes to character.
Well, I'm not impugning anybody's character. I'm just saying, people can change their opinion and everything else. And no one's saying you can't change your opinion. I'm just saying, give me a basis for the change of the opinion other than the vote. That's all I'm saying.
I was the one that brought it up. And first of all, the budget passed. So let me finish. The budget passed by a substantial amount. So you're equating the loss of the referendum with the decision to move the budget makes no sense. You're comparing apples to oranges. The budget passed. I brought it up because I believe Mr. Carr asked a question, at which point the business administrator, and I wasn't really paying attention, but he said of the 500-plus districts, only 16 are having the vote. So I said, wow, I'd like to know why. So that's the reason why I brought it up, and those are the reasons why I had the questions asked. If you were sitting here, you heard the questions asked, and you heard the business administrator give the answers to my questions.
I know, I'm not disputing that, and I heard what he
There's nothing
said.
to dispute about that.
No,
because those are facts.
there isn't at all. And I said the operating budget passed.
So I don't know why you're comparing the loss of the referendum to the moving of the budget. Because if you were listening, Mr. Tequila said that any issue with the budget, any issue with regard to referendum, any issue with regard to the second question, any issue with regard to a budget over the 2% cap goes to the electorate.
I didn't hear that.
Well,
And
you heard it
okay, well, maybe I'm gonna have to get a hearing aid. But the
Possibly.
point, but what I was saying to you was, and you were on the board and you were here that night,
Yes, I was.
and you said to me, we've already thought about it and discussed it and everything else, and we don't think it's a good thing to change it.
And at that point, only a few districts had moved over. Now, only 16 districts out of 558. So it's okay to rethink something like I did, and I said, okay, I'd like to know why.
I didn't, you're missing, I didn't ask that. What I said was, putting the things in sequence,
And I'm
all right,
telling you
as to what,
sequence is wrong.
and having been told a year ago that this had been thought of and considered, and the decision was no. That's the way it was represented.
All right.
And the fact of the matter was, all of a sudden, there's a change. And my
telling you
question
why
was, nobody's locked in on,
I'm sorry, what was
on
that,
saying
Tom?
something.
Nobody what?
Nobody is locked in. In other words, I made a decision, I can't change my mind. But I'm saying with the timing sequence, in other words, if in February the board had said, we're thinking of moving this elections to November, fine. In March, fine. April, fine. I look at the paper in May, and things are, after the election, and all of a sudden, let's remove some of this from the hands of the public. That's the only thing that I'm asking the board,
Well, hopefully I've
giving
dispelled-
reasons
hopefully
why.
I've dispelled your position by connecting the failure of the referendum to the budget, because as I've said to you the third time, the budget passed. And if we did it in February, March like you're proposing, then we would not be giving anyone a chance to voice their opinions and to come to the board and say, listen, I don't think that's fair.
I
So
wasn't-
right now, it's coming up now, because quite frankly, it was a question I had. And right now it's June, and as you heard the business administrator says, the decision doesn't have to be made until February 2016.
Okay. You have to realize, I don't come, and I take my hat off to the people who come. I don't come to all the meetings. I see what I see
But
in
they
the
are
paper.
taped, and you can watch them versus hear speculation, or they're taped, you can watch them. So you can hear it firsthand. So, but the concern is, you're actually accusing us of revenge. You're actually accusing this board of sitting here for literally hundreds of hours, and you think it's a revenge tactic, which is absolutely insulting.
I'm not accusing
And
you.
you're not even at all the meetings, so you're just coming periodically and throwing these bars.
I did not accuse you of anything. What I indicated to you, and which I said was, the appearance. You have an attorney who's sitting on there, he'll tell you what, you see something, something happens, something changes, and all of a sudden, what you were told before changes.
Thank you.
And all I'm asking for is an explanation other than, well, now we started to think about this in a different fashion. Because I got the impression a year ago that this issue of moving the election was decided and done, absent anything new.
Well, had you been here for the meeting after the referendum failed, the man standing behind you is the one that brought this question up, which is why the board revisited it, which is why Mr. Connors asked these questions.
Okay.
He made the choice to bring it up. We didn't make the choice to bring it up. We're doing what we're supposed to do by answering the public's questions.
I understand that. It's
Well-
fine. I'm being told that now, it's fine. And I don't think this meeting is on, or the one before is on. You know, I mean,
Is on what?
you said I can go on the computer and I can watch and see what the tapes are.
They're taped.
Right.
You can watch
Okay.
it. You can watch the meetings.
Mr. Reardon, for your information, and Tom, I'll ask for your clarification, but in the township, the meetings are shown live on Verizon. In the borough, they're shown on delay on the 2 cable channels, and the board does post the videos to its website.
Okay.
It
Well,
does take
yeah,
about
that-
a week or so for the board to get it on the website, but they do repeat on the cable television prior to that.
Okay, well, you have to realize too, I'm not that, a big fan on the computer, okay? Thank you.
My name is Stuart Carr, 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham.
You have to sign it.
I apologize for that. Yes, I did bring up this topic a couple weeks ago. I also brought it up in November, and I think maybe in January. Again, not just, again, to have sleeping dogs lie and suddenly wake up, but I want to make sure that whatever does come out is spoken to and addressed in a public forum in a comprehensive fashion, as opposed to, I think, again, very well done in terms of a prosecutorial or whatever type of leading the witness type thing, but not quite both sides. And I'm frankly disappointed that we didn't go through both sides of the, or multi-sides of this discussion here. But the reason I'm raising the issue again is fundamentally hasn't changed since 2012. So all these different topics that have come up, and we now have more sheep. We have 550 or 520 districts now that have, you know, taken the Kool-Aid or whatever else. Fundamentally, we have a right to vote on the budget as the public, which is a control over the board who has control over the district. And that is something that the public has taken seriously, notwithstanding the 11% or whatever numbers that we have. Again, it's our right. If we want to be irresponsible and not vote, we should be able to do that. That doesn't mean you should take it away and punish us because we don't happen to show up in April. Fundamentally, there is a check and balance that is in the school district for 100 years, whatever it has been, which is different from the representative democracy, as Dr. LaSousa calls it, and most of our other forms of government here. Again, I would argue we should be able to vote directly on the budget and those other things, as opposed to taking the budget vote away here. I think it's a paramount interest. I think 15, 20 grand, whatever it is, on a $60 million budget is noise to say we as 9 people are going to take the right of 12,000 people to vote, and we're not going to give it to them anymore. And then we're going to have, again, these hearings that we call them, where we have a nature of selling the budget to one of informing citizens of the budget. We talk about we're going to have public hearings. That's all very nice. But again, fundamentally, very simple. We have a right to vote, which we take seriously, which we voted, I think, 25 or 28 years directly on the operating budget in a positive sense. we should continue to have that right to vote. I've heard nothing in any way, shape, or form that says that it's better for the public to have 9 people decide what's going to happen with our budget versus having 9 people decide on the budget and then having the public able to yay or nay that. The argument about the board of the, the borough council and the township council, somehow they can get crosswise or something, again, that's also noise. The number of times that's happened, I don't think it's happened here in the townships, at least since regionalization. I'm not sure before that with the 2, whether it ever happened. But again, we are a single community here of 2 whatever groups, the township and the borough, and if that ever did come to fruition, I'm much more comfortable that the township and the board of the borough could come to some kind of resolution that made sense for the consumers and made sense for the community as a whole. And I'd rather take that risk than give away the right to vote on an annual budget. We talked about the referendum, $25 million, big number, absolutely. People came out, they voted. We're talking now about taking away the right to vote on an annual $60 million budget. I think that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, again, we're only really talking about the 2% dimension because, again, so long as we're in the 2%, we're really talking about that amount there. Because if we go to November, you can't go above 2%. So I'm really talking about the base budget to 2%, which is really the amount that's in play here. Because if we have $60 million budget and we can get 2% without having to ask the voters, that's really all we can vote on effectively if we keep it in April. But I submit that having that incremental check and balance to the 1 in 20 years or 1 in 25 years to say we're going to vote no on the budget and take the risk of what the yahoos are going to do with the township and the borough and whatever else is a worthwhile thing and a worthwhile check and balance. And I've heard nothing from Dr. LaSousa or Mr. O'Neill or Mr. Fife to say that it makes sense to move it to November. There's just nothing there, except 15 grand and less accountability to the public ultimately. We say in here, again, this list of pluses and minuses, which I don't think has changed. Again, quote, just for changes the nature of selling the budget to one of informing citizens of the budget. This would likely save time from the perspective of advisory committees, presentations, publications, etc. This is coming from the superintendent. So we talk all about we're going to do the same thing. We're saying we're able to save time because we're not going to have to answer to the public and sell to the public. I think that's a good cost of doing business. I think we should have that. And by taking that away, I think you as citizens as opposed to board members ought to really think hard about, do I, as one of 9 people, want to take 13,000 people's right to vote away unilaterally? And the fact that Christie cut a deal with the legislature or whatever, again, I commend them for having the 2%, otherwise we'd be talking about 12%, caps here. 2% budget, it's still not worth it to say, we'll keep it at 2%, but we're going to take away the right to vote. They gave us the option. We're the last man standing. We ought to stay there. Hopefully other people will come back and see the light and demand the right to vote at the school budget level. I just, again, implore you to do that. And again, I haven't heard anything about talking about the right to vote in any of your discussions here, and I'm frankly disappointed about that. We're saving 15 grand. We're talking 10% of the people voting and all these types of things. We're not talking about the fact that we're able to actually have a right, and we want to keep that right to vote. So again, it sounds like it's a done deal, and that's unfortunate, but hopefully somebody will come to the light. And the final comment I would have is, if you're serious about doing this, and I asked President Weber about this, and she said it's probably a board thing. If you're really serious about this, let's find out at the public level. Let's spend one more 15 grand and have a referendum and see if the public wants to do this. See if the public wants to vote on the ability to give up their, not the ability, but vote to give up their right to vote. And if that's the public's, view, then power to them. But everybody I've talked to, or just about everybody, including Mr. Reardon and these other folks, was not aware at the time that when you go to November, you give up your right to vote. So again, if you want to do it, power to you, but I'd suggest perhaps having a referendum or at least a couple of public hearings so you can actually get it out to the public and let them know that you're losing that right to vote. That's the issue here. It's a simple issue. There's all this other stuff is noise. Okay, so as citizens of the community, I would implore you to consider that. Thank you.
You already signed in the bill. You can go back.
Thank you. Thank you. I think this is important that it's happening and that the public asks questions and that you look into this. We also heard last week from a few of the board members something that I think is very important. That the community is also concerned by the fact that there are not enough people willing to step up to and serve at the board. I think Ms. Cronin or I'm not sure the other person said, so we have 7 of the 9 board members that were elected unopposed. And that's not something we're proud of. It's our duty as a community to do whatever is necessary to get more people interested to vote, interested to come and show up here, interested to step up and participate. But so I think we're not the only ones in New Jersey. This is a problem that's beyond our borders. But there are some communities that manage to maintain competitive votes and people to step in and lively debates about options for the schools. And we've been looking at a few of them. So some around us, the neighboring school districts and others, and we try to see, okay, what is that they're doing different, if anything? So we found a few things. I'm not sure there is direct correlation, but casual conversation indicate that if you have processes that are involving those, the public into maybe taking more part into the decision, inviting them to voice an opinion and have it taken into consideration, seems to have some effect. Again, it's not a scientific study, but let me share with you 3 things that seem to be specific features for some of those districts. So some of them have their committee meetings. They have the agenda put on the website. They have the schedule of the committee meetings. They have the members, so everything is pushed to the public so they know exactly who's meeting what on how, and the discussions are put there. The topics of discussion are put there. Some of them put also the minutes of the committee meetings. So usually it's not very long because it's a one-pager, but it gives you, in essence, exactly what the committees have been discussing. There are others that, instead of going through the work of doing that, they just open the committee meetings to the public. Monroe has a policy that makes all the committee meetings open to the public. I'm not sure how many people show up. Monroe. So that's one of the features that we have seen. Committee meetings more open, more public, more. The second thing is a few of them have citizen advisory committees. So. And I've been learning about that. People who've been running the schools before this board and before I came to town. So it used to be very common in the 70s to have citizen advisory committees serving, like for the borough or the township, as support groups for the different committees that ultimately will take the decisions. Like we have zoning board, they have the different groups that the different committees. Commission or boards that do the legwork actually and provide information for the board members, and that by itself feeds more people into the process. And when that happens, some of those people step up to the plate, and they get to know the importance of the role and do that. So now I have some documentation to share with you. Summit, for example, next door, they have a policy by which the president of the board appoints advisory committee meetings, and they give them the mission to go and explore, evaluate, discuss, and bring findings. The decision remains with the board, the elected board, but the legwork and the inclusion of the opinions comes through that process. Maybe something you want to consider. And the third thing is that we've seen in a few school districts is there is a strategic planning process, and the mechanism to build a strategic planning process reaches out to the community and brings the people around the table, ask for opinion, and not only just the 3-minute comments. So they have meetings, and it can be run different ways. The New Jersey School Board Association promotes that. The Association of Superintendents promotes that. And some school districts, a number of them actually, I think an increasing number, is following suit and have some mechanism in the community that brings everybody around the table, or at least the people who want, and give them the opportunity to sit down, work in 2-hour sessions, whether it's on facilities or in finance, and some very creative ideas come through the process. I think Milburn was looking at leveraging the community to raise more private money. So there are a few ideas like that. I'm going to share with you also some information. And the third and last one is that was my third. So I'd like to give you a copy of a few of those documents, if I may.
Sure. But you're not asking our permission to create a advisory committee, right? I mean, go ahead.
I'm just suggesting that some school districts
Okay.
use that as a process to involve the members of the community into the mechanism of coming up with the ideas, suggestion of the ideas, etc. So
Then I would have to reverse that and say, Nabil, can you organize those committees and summarize the points and then sit down and meet? Because quite frankly, I don't know that, I can't fit another meeting into my schedule. So since you're kind enough to bring this to our attention, and you organize the committees, and you facilitate that citizen advisory committee, and then bring it to our attention, but to have us sit at additional meetings may not be feasible.
well, what's done is the tradition is to defer to the president of the board is typically the person that initiates this process. Doesn't mean that that person sits on those meetings, but I will not overstep and come with suggestions that are unsolicited.
Then
So,
I'm going to anoint you as the person to go ahead and pull those committees together. Because,
Sure.
I literally have, Phil and I have to log our hours. I have logged 257 hours on board business for 2014. Gladly do it, volunteer to do it, but I just don't know that I can take on additional committees. But that's not to say, you can't grab these people who are, willing to jump in and create a committee and then maybe summarize your input. I don't know, I know you're not waiting for my permission or authority, so I guess I'm trying to figure out.
no, I think it's healthier if it comes from the board to say we are inviting the community to come with suggestions, ideas, probably give some guidance, put some framework.
You're invited. I'm not following. If you go out to the library and create a focus group and, you say that I want to introduce, a different, and then bring that to the board,
I think it's healthier if it's a dialogue more than a separate group doing things to the board. That's my
The
sense.
problem is bandwidth, quite honestly. We're engaged in dialogue all the time, and again, those seats ran unopposed. Rich and I are dying to move on. Rich more than me. But I just don't know how feasible, and it's not that, there's a lot of smart people out there,
Right.
and maybe you can organize them, but to just throw barbs and say you're doing this wrong, and, it's not helpful, it's not productive.
I agree with you.
But to expect, honestly, the bandwidth is just not there to have, 10 more meetings in a month or a 6-month period, and still, our job is really, again, as I said at the beginning, to make sure that the board is making sure the district does their job.
I agree
just
with
don't
you.
want to set
Of
unrealistic
course.
expectations. We can have a roundtable discussion, but I just don't want to set unrealistic expectations. But if you can help facilitate this,
Absolutely. No, not only
you can
me.
take this list back and gather your folks.
But I think we would use some guidance from the board to say these are the issues we're facing, these are the areas of exploration that we think are useful for the community. And I'm sure, and there are people sitting here, the engineers, the financial planners, the data analysts, all those people will be very happy to put their skills, expertise to work for the purpose of what the board wants to achieve.
Right.
And I think that's how it's used in the other
Thanks.
school
I just
districts.
don't want to set unrealistic expectations, but
So that's,
but help us.
of course.
Thank you. Okay. thank
Okay,
you.
I'll take an appointment and come and talk to you, so.
All righty, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
I would just like to ask a question. Did I understand correctly that the board was bringing up the information about possibly, the information about what it entails to change the vote from April to November, simply because at this point you're just imparting information and steps and in direct response to some of the citizens in the audience's requests from the last meeting? It isn't the board just kind of running with this idea suddenly. You're being responsive to just the questions that were asked in the audience, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted, because it sort of got a little off tangent, and I wanted to just clarify in my mind, the board is not
It's
just,
a fine line, apparently, responsiveness and irresponsiveness, so.
okay, but you were just, not simply, you were doing due diligence and responding to the citizens' questions by giving the information tonight. There's no other hidden agenda? No.
No.
Right.
It's insulting to think that, but.
I would understand how you would think it's insulting to think that, and I was not confused at all by what the board was saying. until, until the waters got a little muddied midway with some other feedback. So I'm glad I understood correctly.
No, it was a comment that was made, the business administrator said 16 districts out of 558. And it sank in as I was driving home. There's no conspiracy here.
I absolutely, see that, and I see...
And I asked the administrator, I had a bunch of questions, I couldn't be here for the last meeting. And I just wanted the questions asked. There is no
So
conspiracy.
Absolutely. I see that as responsible and proactive, and the board doing due diligence. So I just wanted to support that you were asking that. And I just wanted to also congratulate on the success of the lacrosse clinic and applaud the suggestion to do more of those experiential learning programs, possibly even incorporate them in the curriculum. That's an example of providing education in a different way by a different vehicle. And I would just pose that different ways of presenting learning experiences for our students can be dynamic. Maybe we can bring some of those changes and innovations to areas such as homework protocol. And in bringing the enriched clinics, maybe like the football clinic and the lacrosse, I would like to maybe suggest that we extend that and maybe include some theater arts clinics or some other humanities. Just an idea.
Can I just dovetail on one thing? I just think it needs to be noted, the board had a discussion tonight. We are not making a decision. We had a discussion, and we will continue to have discussions.
One more. I just wanted to check, Stuart Carr again in Chatham Township. I wanted to check on the timing for this discussion. Do you anticipate the next board meeting there would be action? Are we talking somewhere in the December, January timeframe? Any sense of that at all, President Weber?
I don't have a sense. I know that we're not taking action on June 1st. But, you know, this is the first opportunity we discussed it.
Okay.
And all discussions from a board have to happen in this public session. Committees take on the committees, but as a public board, this is the only time we can have discussions during these meetings, as a board in its entirety.
Okay. But again, I would implore you to consider the referendum concept, because not a whole lot of people are aware of the implications of moving to November. Thank you again for your time.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to close the public meeting, and we have no executive session, just to, no? All those, could somebody second that motion? Second.
Sorry.
All those in favor? All right, opposed, abstained. Tom, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.